Welcome back to Thrive Yoga Fit Transformational Coaching. This is Erin. So this is a shorter podcast. This is the affirmations podcast, so I can connect with you midweek and give you a little sweetness. So this podcast is about an experience that I had with my partner, Matt, who, if you've been listening to my podcast, you're probably familiar with him. He's done a couple of guest drop-ins. He also has a podcast called Dharma Nights. If you want to learn about yogic philosophy, he teaches yogic philosophy in our yoga teacher training course, and he is amazing. So, I have been doing this intuitive eating course called Eat for Life with Dr. Lynn Rossi, and we're on about week 6. And so I have been studying when I go for a snack, when I have the impulse to, what's underneath that? Why do I need a snack? I just ate. And so last night I just had this kind of big craving come up. I was like, man, I want to eat more dinner, which was interesting because I definitely had enough. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to sit with it. And, what are you really hungry for? And I started to feel what I call a big sad. It's a big sad. And I was trying to process it, and I just felt so uncomfortable. And Matt was reading in bed. So I went and I told him I had a big sad, and he's an amazing partner. And I said, what do you think I should do with this big sad? Because I was in a very, when emotions come like waves, sometimes you're not thinking oh, I could use one of my 35 tools. He said, why don't you take it and make art? He said, why don't you funnel that sad and make music? And so I started singing, Jai Ma, Jai Ma, Jai Ma, Jai Ma, so on and so forth. And I asked if he could drum, and he's like, well, because he was laying in bed. It's kind of a big ask. So he started singing with me, and then he said, hold on. And he grabbed, of all things, he grabbed an empty salsa container, which, the lid kind of pops up and down. So he used his fingers and drumming on the top of the salsa lid as well as on the side. And it actually made a really good sound. And so he was just drumming as if he had a djembe or a dumbek and singing along with me. And so I sang Jai Ma, Jai Ma, which is essentially honoring the great mother, And what came up was a lot of grief of missing my mom. So not sure why it came up, maybe because the veil is thin, it's Halloween, and she wanted to connect with me. Sometimes I see posts of, this is actually probably what triggered it. I saw a friend who, she has 3 generations, in one photo, it's her mother, and her mother's mother. And they were celebrating, the grandmother's 101st birthday. And it hit me. And I thought, I will never have that because my mom is not on this plane anymore. And my grandmother passed away 8 years ago. So I won't have that. And it created a lacking in me and just a sadness that I won't get to experience my mother in that way, though I can connect with her on a different plane, on a spiritual plane. So the big sad came up, the grief came up. And so what I did was I chose to funnel it, upon the advice of my great partner, funnel it into some music. So I saw this shirt once coming back from a silent retreat at the airport, and it said, turn your pain into art. So if you are experiencing pain, if you are stuck in it and it's just washing over you and drowning you, try your best to take that pain and breathe and try to funnel it into anything. It doesn't have to be music if you don't feel comfortable singing, drawing, journaling. Sometimes I do body art. I move my body in different ways with yoga poses. I dance, however you can funnel it. So your pain is energy and it wants to come up and come out. And for so long, I suppressed it with drugs, alcohol, bulimia, which I stopped doing that a long time ago. And in an effort to want to discover myself and know the deeper aspects of my truth, I started looking at snacking, which is something I've been doing, just like, oh, just have a little snack. But when I stopped doing it and I started sitting with the impulse and then the feeling underneath the impulse, I've been experiencing grief and sadness and sometimes even joy that I didn't know how to direct. So there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with big feelings. Sometimes they come up and they might not make sense. Sometimes I coach people and they say, my life's so good, I'm not sure why I feel this way. Well, it could just be stashed in your body. And when the mind becomes quiet, all of a sudden this stuff comes up and it just wants to be heard. And then it wants to maybe be expressed and directed. So if this applies to you, I hope that it helps you. I hope that you find a way to transmute your pain and suffering into love and compassion or art. So have a fantastic day. Namaste. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to support the podcast and if it's helping you, please consider writing a review. You can go to iTunes or Google Play, go into the search bar and type in Thrive Yoga Fit Transformational Coaching, scroll down, and you can leave a review. This helps other people to find me as well as bumps us up in the search ratings. Also, this podcast is sponsor-free, so that means we don't receive anything for doing it. If you feel so inclined and this podcast is helping to support you and you want to return the favor and help to support any production costs of the podcast, feel free to give a donation to a Venmo link, Thrive Yoga Fit, or PayPal, Erin@erincoach.com. If you don't have the means, don't worry about it. We're not going anywhere. You're all good. But if you would like to give back, you can give back in those ways. Last thing, we have a coaching certification coming up, and it's 7 days of an intensive work, followed by a 3-month mentorship. You will not find another teacher that's more passionate and dedicated than I am to my students and their learning, and not just their learning, but the application and how they show up in their life. If you've been listening to this podcast and it's had a huge impact on your life, just imagine what it would be like to spend 7 intensive days with me and then a 3-month mentorship. You can check that out at thriveyogafit.com/coach-certification. Again, thriveyogafit.com/coach-certification. Thank you so much. Namaste.